Provocation is one of the most basic but confounding aspects of warfare. Despite its sometimes obvious use, it has succeeded consistently against audiences around the world for millennia to compel war. J.D. Maddox, former CIA Counterterrorism Center Chief, Intelligence Advisor to the Secretary of Homeland Security. A false flag is a term used to describe military or intelligence operations that governments perpetrate on their own civilians for the purpose of blaming another country or group. Often this is done to get the public behind whatever war the ruling class would like to wage, a war that, if the general public knew the facts, would rather not get involved in, and that the ruling class has no moral justification for. So the ruling class, like deadly omnipotent spoiled children, kill and maim members of their own society in order to scare them into action. It's the ultimate manifestation of how governments view their citizens. False flags happen more frequently than you might think, and many have been documented and even admitted by the governments committing these acts of terrorism on their own people. In this new Black Pilled series, we'll cover false flags throughout history, information that governments and the fake news media conveniently never mention. Why, of course, the people don't want war. But after all, it is the leaders of the country who determine the policy, and it is always a simple matter to drag the people along, whether it is a democracy, or a fascist dictatorship, or a parliament, or a communist dictatorship. Voice or no voice, the people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. That is easy. All you have to do is tell them they are being attacked, and denounce the pacifists for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same in any country. Hermann Göring, President of the Reichstag, Nazi leader. The burning of the Reichstag in 1933, a false flag that would put the Nazi Party in power. Nazi General Franz Halder testified at the Nuremberg trials that Nazi leader Hermann Göring had admitted to setting fire to the German Parliament building, an event that was blamed on the communists. This event swayed public opinion against the communists in Germany and was the turning point that led to the Nazis taking control of the German government. It would also be revealed at the Nuremberg trials that the Nazis conducted attacks on their own people to justify the invasion of Poland. In 1939, another false flag in what is now known as the Gleiwitz incident. Nazi operatives dressed in Polish uniforms and attacked the Gleiwitz radio station. They then broadcast anti-German messages in Polish. Then, to make it more convincing, they poisoned Franciszek Honeck, a German farmer who was sympathetic to the Poles, dressed him up to look like a saboteur, and then left his body at the scene after shooting it several times to fool the public into thinking he was killed in the attack. This is just one of many false flags performed by the Nazis in order to sway public opinion against Poland until war could be justified. In many cases, these operations required intense premeditation and precise execution. Sometimes it involved threatening local authorities who weren't in on the deception if they got too nosy. But as we now know, the false flags were effective, and the Nazis gained the public support needed to invade Poland by threatening and killing that same public. If you think the Nazis were only capable of doing this because they were uniquely monstrous, think again. Any government that desires to send its people to die in an unjust war, a war it can't make a moral argument for, will have no problem sacrificing its citizens prior to sacrificing its servicemen. Both are cattle to the ruling class, and their lives are of little value. The Nazis did not invent false flags, and false flags are not the exception. They are the rule. In 1954, in a failed false flag attempt, Israelis were caught planting bombs at a U.S. diplomatic facility in Egypt. It was discovered they planned to leave behind evidence that would mislead the United States into thinking that the bombs had been planted by Arabs. Israel was at war with Egypt at the time and extremely motivated to gain the support of the United States. The only reason this plot was discovered was one of the bombs detonated prematurely, leading to the capture and confession of the Israeli conspirators. In a similar false flag incident, Israeli intelligence operative Viktor Ostrovsky later confessed that in 1984, Mossad, Israel's version of the CIA, planted a radio transmitter inside of Gaddafi's compound in Libya. This transmitter broadcast fake terrorist messages recorded by Mossad to frame Gaddafi as a supporter of terrorism. This time the false flag was successful, and President Reagan bombed Libya shortly after the transmissions were discovered. What's more, the United States military clearly does not view these false flag operations by Israel as isolated incidents. On September 10, 2001, the day before 9/11, the Washington Post published portions of an internal document produced by the Army School of Advanced Military Studies at Fort Leavenworth that described Mossad as, quote, ruthless and cunning, has capability to target US forces and make it look like Palestinian/Arab act. But of course, it's not just our enemies or so-called allies that have employed false flags. The United States itself has admitted to participating in planting false flags to deceive the public into backing the wars desired by the elites, both at home and abroad. In 1962, the American Joint Chiefs of Staff all signed off on a plan that involved the CIA sinking boats of Cuban refugees on the high seas, hijacking American airplanes, blowing up a U.S. ship, and orchestrating violent terrorism in U.S. cities. The attacks would then be blamed on Cuba to justify an invasion. This plan was called Operation Northwoods, and it was approved all the way up the chain of command until it was ultimately rejected by the Kennedy administration. This should give you a good idea of what the deep state thought of people 50 years ago. Do you think the value of life in the minds of the deep state has gone up or down since 1962? It's important that you broaden your understanding of the ruling class and the tactics they use against their own people. Tactics they use to stay in control and to wage their wars. These stories and more will be covered in the new Black Pilled Presents False Flags. For Blackpilled.com, I'm Devin Stack, and if you like my content, I'm entirely self-funded, so please donate a few bucks to either my Bitcoin address or my Patreon page in the description. Those donations make it possible for me to do the research and produce the high-quality videos that you've come to expect from Black Pilled. Thank you to those who have donated in the past and for anyone who's starting up right now. Also, don't forget to like and share and subscribe for more.